The latest tech.
I'm Alexa. I can answer your questions.
Interviews.
And we are evolving, and we are seeing an amazing opportunity that is happening.
Accessibility.
Accessibility is one of our core values. It's even a part of our mission statement.
This is Double Tap TV.
Welcome to a very exciting edition of Double Tap TV. This week we're doing something a little bit different than usual, and we're going to be bringing our guests on right away because even today we won't be able to finish the discussion that we're going to start. Now, that being said, not only are we going to be chatting about creating music and accessibility, but we're going to continue the conversation next week as part of a two-part special here on Double Tap TV. Thank you guys so much for being with us each and every single week. And before I bring on our guests, and of course, Steve and Scott, let me remind you how you can get involved because I know you're going to have lots of questions and you're going to want to get involved. Our email address is feedback@ami.ca. On Twitter, if you're not already following us, you're going to want to do that. It's at DoubleTapCanada. And of course, other social media, we're at doubletap.online. I am Mark Aflalo, and each and every single week, this show would not be the same if it weren't for one Stephen Scott. Stephen, I am super excited to kick off this week's show.
Do you know, every week I look forward to this program, Mark, as you well know, but this is a special one. This is going to be a really interesting conversation, and I'm glad to be here. Although I will say, I think this week we're not going to be doing much talking.
No, and I like it when we don't do much talking. It gives us an opportunity to sit back, relax, sip the coffee. But you know what, Steve? Let's dive into this week's episode and welcome our special guests because we've got two of them. He is the head of accessibility and partnerships at Avid, the creators of incredible software used to create music and video such as Pro Tools, Media Composer. Ed Gray is with us this week, and he is the business owner, an entrepreneur, a Grammy award-winning engineer. He's a musician and a music technologist, having worked with incredible musicians, including one that comes up a lot when we talk about visual impairment, Stevie Wonder. Robert Arbittier, thank you so much for being with us this week. Rob, let's start with you. How do you describe yourself to others? Because I'm just reading things off of LinkedIn.
The way I usually describe it is my life has always been half music and half technology. So I started on classical piano when I was 3 years old, and I have a whole history in music, and I love music, but I also, around age 9 or 10, fell in love with electronics and built my first computer and all that kind of stuff, and totally love that world. So my career has always been back and forth between music and technology. A lot of times it was guided by which was paying better, but it was also about where were the bigger advances. And then, at about age 21, my career took a huge turn back into music, and we'll probably talk about all that stuff. But I'm a music technology guy, sort of split 50-50.
And that's a mixed kind of 50-50 between nerd and musician, which really paid off. But how did that happen?
I had basically decided not to go into music, but then meeting Stevie Wonder and realizing there might be a career there, all of a sudden I was back into music. And through him, I met Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston and Ray Charles and a whole bunch of other people who I ended up working with, and my music career was born. But it was always a combination of music and technology. And I've told the story before. When my big leap with Stevie was that he had sort of abandoned the band I was working with to go on tour. And that's when I wrote him this sequencer called S, very clever name. It's called S for sequencer. And what I did is I bought him a computer with the last of the credit on my credit card. And I found out where he was going to be staying, which was the Plaza in New York. He was at Madison Square Garden, I think. And I just said, hey, Stevie, I'm Rob. I'm in that band Mix that you're going to be producing. And I've got something here that I think you're going to love. And I need to show it to you now because I have no money left whatsoever. I spent it all to bring this to you. And so if you like this, I need you to buy it from me tonight, because I'm completely broke and we can get on with things. And if you don't like it, then I'm giving up on the music business and I'm going back down to Philly, which is where I was from. And I'm just moving back in with my parents. And that's the end of this. Because at this point, it had already been about 9 months since I'd moved to LA to work with him. And then he left on tour. So he said, well, let me see what you got. And so I went in to his room with him. And I had never seen a suite like that at the Plaza before. I mean, it was like 10 times bigger than the apartment I was living in. But I set up the keyboard, he had keyboards there. I set up the computer on his dining room table, and I showed it to him, and he just completely lost his mind. He loved it. We ended up staying up the whole rest of the night, and I was actually making software updates for him while he was playing with it. And then not only did he want to keep the system, but I ended up finishing the whole tour with him making software changes like after every show. And by the end of the tour, we were actually using the computer on stage. And his other technical guy, a great guy named Bob Braylove, was on his way, like transitioning to a gig with the Grateful Dead. And that meant there was an opening. So by the end of that tour, I was also Stevie's technical director for the tour. So it ended up being this huge pivotal time in my life. And at that point, I was definitely back in the music business. I got to watch him work with, at the time, with what were his tools at the time, like the Lin 9000 was his main drum machine and sequencer. And I saw the way he flew on that, and he was really good with that. And he and Roger Lin had worked together some, Roger Lin knew how to make it largely non-visual for him. And so I got to see Stevie really fly on that thing. And I saw the way he had some other systems like the Fairlight and the Synclavier, which I had only seen in documentaries. Like I'd never seen them up close. These were synthesizer systems that were like $200,000-$400,000. So not most people had them. So I'd seen them in magazines, but I had never seen them up close. And those systems he needed operators for. And he couldn't run them himself. But the Lin 9000 he could run himself, and the DMX drum machine and the Emulator 2 sampler and some of these really early gadgets. And there's no reason he couldn't use a computer himself. And he told me when he found out I was a computer guy, which is how I was introduced to him. When this band in Philly introduced me first to him, they said I was a computer guy. Because selling me as a dorky white keyboard player from Philly was not going to go anywhere. But as a dorky white computer nerd, he didn't have a lot of those. And so I immediately saw what he liked about a synth and what made it easy for him. And this was right when the DX7 had first come out, it had been out for a little while, but he was just starting to use it a lot. And I saw that they had put the little Braille tape on it for him to be able to find all the buttons, because it was completely flat, so impossible for a blind guy. But if you put the little Braille tape on it with one of those little label makers, you could make it non-visual. And I saw the way he used that. And I saw that he had some early Braille devices that could hook to a computer and become the screen for the computer. By the way, one very quick funny story about the Braille label maker. For one of Stevie's birthdays, after I'd been with him for a little while, we got him whatever the next generation of DX7 was, and it also had the flat labels. And we put all the stickers on it so he could use it non-visually, and presented it to him for his birthday. And he started playing with it, and he started laughing. Like, in a way, I hadn't really seen him laugh. We were like, what's so funny? And it turned out we'd put all the Braille stickers on upside down.
Oh, no.
Got to read Braille. So at that point, I then learned how to read Braille, but I'm one of the few idiots who could read Braille visually. My touch wasn't sensitive enough, but I could look at it and read the Braille, which is not a real marketable skill. But in the Stevie Wonder world, at least it meant I wasn't going to put his stickers on upside down anymore.
Stephen, I told you we're not going to get a word in edgewise here, but there is so much more to get to. Ed, I promise we'll let you speak as well. Don't worry about it. So guys, stick around. We're going to come back with more conversation around music and how it was made after the break here on Double Tap TV. Stick around.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit ami.ca/doubletap. This is Double Tap TV.
Welcome back to Double Tap TV. I am Mark Aflalo with Stephen Scott on a special two-parter episode of Double Tap TV. We're joined by Ed Gray, head of accessibility at Avid, and music technologist, Grammy Award-winning engineer, and entrepreneur Robert Arbittier.
Okay, let's turn to Ed Gray, who also joins us. Ed, let's let you have a word in here. You've been an accessibility advocate in your role in Avid for years now, and you're visually impaired yourself, right?
I've been at Avid forever. I've been there for 25 years last November. So I have diabetes, and I have diabetic retinopathy, which is this unfortunate complication that you get when you've had diabetes for a long time. And it's where your capillaries, your small blood vessels in your eyes rupture. I discovered that my vision was serious. I remember I was in Boston at Avid headquarters, and I was trying to plug in some cables. I had a Pro Tools TDM system and some other finicky stuff that you had to plug in. I needed some assistance. I remember that being a moment where I said, I can't do this independently.
A lot of us who have lost vision over time can certainly relate to that, Ed, I think. Is that when accessibility came to Avid? Did it come because you needed it yourself?
There was definitely an interest in supporting blind users. And I'll just say just, one of my world observations is that oftentimes something's not that important until it happens to you. So I was the head of the third-party developer program, and people approached me for this, and I was, like, I love you, man. That's the most beautiful thing I ever heard. Good luck. We can help. And then once my vision started to fail and I wanted to use our tools, I became a spokesman and driver for it. Now it's fully baked. It's a kind of a first-class citizen in our development. We test for accessibility with Pro Tools and Sibelius. We're starting to work on accessibility for Windows. So it's a very, very important initiative.
I'll just add, there's been a big change at Avid, and obviously Ed is driving things in an amazing way now, but it took a long time for them to really kind of embrace the accessibility thing. With Stevie, I was always trying to talk to manufacturers to get them to make their stuff more accessible.
Ed, I imagine you had to educate a lot of people at Avid when you were there during your time, especially as you started losing your vision. Did that ever get tiring? Did you find it cumbersome?
It never gets tiring. And in fact, it's kind of gaining momentum as we speak, because an accessibility program in a company like let's start like an accessibility program in a company like Apple or Microsoft or Google. You hire a seasoned chief accessibility officer who's gone to school and knows the drill, knows how to organize a large corporate program. For a company like Avid, you can't, you don't necessarily have the luxury of building a department, so you have to take the accessibility support wherever you can get it. And usually there are employees who, like me, have lost vision, or they have a relative that's lost vision, or they've had an accident, or they have a temporary loss of vision. Very important that a lot of disabilities are temporary. And you have to build a coalition and have some objectives, some kind of, in Avid's case, quarterly objectives, just to keep the program vibrant. And you have to get some outside help where you need it, because what I think happens, and this is kind of the stuff of notes I've written recently, is you have a spasm of enthusiasm for an accessibility program. You do some development, and then some other Mondo project comes along, and people are pulled off it, and it just kind of languishes. And if you don't have this commitment at all these levels, product marketing and testing and customer support and the sales and the web properties, it can die on the vine. It can really suffer, and then you have to pick it back up again. And that in fact happened with Avid. It kind of was dormant for a while, and then we picked it back up.
Guys, I love it when I barely have to say a word. This is kind of fun. Stick around. We're really just scraping the surface here on Double Tap TV. When we come back, how is Stevie Wonder connected to Steve Jobs? We'll find out as we come back here on Double Tap TV. Stick around.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit ami.ca/doubletap. This is Double Tap TV.
We are back on Double Tap TV. Thank you guys at home for always getting involved. Our email address, where you keep writing, is feedback at ami.ca. Reach out on Twitter at Double Tap Canada with that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap. I am Mark Aflalo with Stephen Scott, and this week Ed Gray from Avid joins us, and Rob Arbittier, music technologist and entrepreneur. Guys, what amazing stories we've been hearing so far. If you're just tuning in, Stephen and I have been talking to these guys for quite a while, and we've been talking about kind of the way back days of making music, before things like smartphones and computers were really, computers were expensive at that point, if you thought they were expensive now. But even with visual impairments, the technology did exist to make things happen, Stephen.
That's right, Mark. I mean, Ed, I want to bring you on this because I've got a question for you here. Do you think that meaningful accessibility is improving in products? I'm thinking about companies like Microsoft, who certainly seem to be leading the way in this field, not just putting the effort into its products where it can, but also evangelizing and talking about accessibility. Do you feel things are getting better?
Yeah, I see it through, I state it a slightly different way, but it's the same message. And it's just that, here we are, we're Digital Design, and we're Avid, and we're trying to make creative tools so people can do this great thing, create audio and video content and we want to include everyone. So part of that message is like as above below, as below above. We want to say anyone's invited to this party, and also, ideally, and it isn't ideal, you walk up to Pro Tools whether you are normally abled or have some sort of a disability, and you use Pro Tools or Sibelius or other products the same way. It's universal access. It means that everyone uses it the same way. You don't have Pro Tools for the blind guys and Pro Tools for the sighted guys.
Guys, I know we dived into the topic right off the start, but we never asked you, how did you guys meet?
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, I met Ed decades ago in probably his earliest days at Avid in the 90s.
Yeah.
Just because I was a beta tester for Pro Tools for a long time, and I just met him as one of the cool guys at Avid, I guess I met you at the design.
Yeah, we both. Rob's visited the company. We both roam the similar trade shows.
Yeah, I mean, we would run into each other a lot, and Ed was also involved with third-party plugins, which I was super interested in. Mm-hmm. I will say, in the beginning, I was purely a Microsoft and Windows guy because there was no way to make the Apple stuff accessible for Stevie. Yeah. So in the 80s and 90s, when everybody was switching to Macs and Apple stuff, we weren't. I was known as like a diehard Windows guy because I was creating the software in Windows. There was just no way to do it on the Mac. And that changed later as Stevie and Steve Jobs became friends and Steve Jobs started focusing more on accessibility. There was a real personal connection there. That is one of the reasons the iPhone is so accessible. I mean, a lot of people don't realize it, but Stevie had a lot to do with that. But in the early days, I was all Windows. So I was the first Windows NT Pro Tools tester back when that was those were dark days, but and so I was very involved with Avid in those beta days because I was really pushing to get Pro Tools more popular on Windows, and by the time they really had Windows figured out, we had switched to Mac.
Rob, did you have any involvement directly with Steve Jobs?
No, Stevie and he would interact on a personal level, and I'm sure that they discussed the tools that Stevie had at his disposal. But I think it was more about Stevie convincing him and anybody who would listen, frankly, about making everything more accessible. Because Stevie's always been a gadget guy. He would always have a bag full of, the equivalent of a zillion iPhones and portable recorders. And, to a blind person, a physical recorder is like a camera is to other people. So Stevie would be doing recordings of his kids and his family and everything else. And so he's still a huge evangelist for getting manufacturers to make those things less visual. And Steve Jobs just was in a position as the iPhone was coming out and, in the early days, the iPod and all that stuff, to make it more accessible. And frankly, it's a good business decision too. It's not like they're just doing it purely altruistically. I mean, there's plenty of visually impaired users out there, whether they're blind or partially sighted or whatever.
The statistics I generally have used are that in developed countries, about 15% of people have some sort of disability. And we have to remember this is, it's not just the blind guy show. We have to think about people with auditory and cognitive and motor disabilities when we do this work. And then, so 15% of people have some sort of disability. They could be temporary disabilities. If you break if you bust your hand, you're disabled. If you kind of, so there's invisible disabilities like schizophrenia and reading issues. And then from there, as far as blindness goes, I believe based on what I've researched that 0.5 to 0.75% of our potential users are blind enough that they can't use a screen even with assistive devices. So they have to rely totally on audio and touch. And then another 3 to 4%, like me, are low vision. So you can kind of get by with some assistance. So we do stuff for colorblind users. We have a dark mode in Pro Tools now where you can adjust the color schemes if you have red-green color blindness. So it's something. I'm just kind of reinforcing Rob's point. If you just did it for the handful of, if you did accessibility, innovation, and development just for the handful of people that have taken an initiative to contact you, it would never be justified. It would never like work on a spreadsheet. What you have to realize is not only are are the categories broad, but also these accessibility developments help sighted and other people too, because you're talking about people viewing the interface and the app the way other people simply can't. And that's called a curb cut. It's named after the dip in the corner on the street corner that they build them for wheelchairs, and they work just as well for baby carriages and shopping carts. These innovations help all users, and they kind of have the company take a fresh look at their development and innovation process.
Stephen, this is why I said it's going to be a two-parter, because we are just scraping the surface of this topic when it comes to creating music. On next week's show, we're going to bring it more into the mainstream, into today, and talk about the tools that exist today and how people are making music and really becoming creators thanks to the tools of today that didn't exist way back when Rob stalked Stevie Wonder to start off his career.
Yeah, what an incredible story. I can't wait to hear more. Really looking forward to hearing more from Rob and Ed next week, and really understanding how someone who's visually impaired can make music today.
So guys at home, if you enjoyed this week's show, let us know. Feedback at ami.ca, of course, is the email address. Reach out on Twitter at DoubleTapCanada with that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap, and do not miss next week's episode here on AMI TV. On behalf of Rob Arbittier, Ed Gray, and Stephen Scott, I am Mark Aflalo. We'll continue the conversation next week.
Hosted by Mark Aflalo and Stephen Scott. Editing, Jordan Steves and Mark Aflalo. Voiceover, Anna Vicino. Integrated Described Video Specialist, Ron Rickford. Coordinating Producer, Jennifer Johnson. Director, Production, Kara Nye. Director, Programming, Brian Perdue. VP, Content Development and Programming, John Melville. President and CEO, David Arrington. Copyright 2021, Accessible Media, Inc.